Well, good evening and welcome to another live episode of Don't Talk TV. There's been a lot of legal type of things happening in the last few weeks that I want to try to cover, as well as answering questions that people put in the comments box. So we've got a lot to go over, and we'll get right into it. Hello, my name's Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So it's our first Thursday of the month live stream. So thank you for everyone that's here. I see we've already got a number of comments in the comment section, so thank you for that. So as I said, there's a number of things we're going to cover. One of the things that we'll cover is the announcement that was made this afternoon about further gun bans and what they're planning on doing with those guns. We'll be talking about that a bit later. I also do have a special announcement for another live stream that we're going to have next week. So please stay with us to hear that announcement because I think it'll be worth your while. And I also wanted to show off some new swag that I have today. The Don't Talk TV themed mug that my PR guy Richard had a couple samples made up. One of these is on its way to Maxime Bernier, but thanks to Canada Post, he doesn't have it yet. Now, these aren't in full production, but we're interested to know, are viewers interested in these? Because if they are, then we could, obviously the template's been made up. We could make it happen for them to be produced such that people could buy them if people are interested. And my wife is also pointing out to me the fact that, of course, our logo has the caricature of me from back in the day when I had a handlebar mustache. So she said, well, now that these mugs are out, you have no choice. You have to grow it back. So we'll see. I as fun as it was, it's a lot of work. So that's why I keep hesitating on that. But let's get straight into it. We got a lot of things I want to talk about. So just to give you a rundown of the things that I want to talk about here, aside, of course, from your questions. So we've got the recent Parliament occupation, Jews in favor of Palestine, I guess in favor of the freedom of Palestine, or however they worded it. I mean, they went right into the Parliament. We'll talk a bit about that. We'll answer a question that I had about Ezra Levant getting arrested and my views on that. I thought it was worth revisiting. We'll also talk about a recent survey that was sent to members of the Canadian Armed Forces. I have a lot of friends that I know that are still in the Canadian Armed Forces. These are most of them are people who didn't take the job but managed to stay in through religious accommodation or just not being kicked out before those ended. Some did have to take it. Maybe they didn't know better until it was too late. But so they made me aware of this. So I've got I think it's interesting to have a look at that. As I said, we will talk about the gun grab, and we'll talk about the town here in Ontario that was fined for declining to participate in a Pride Day, which is another interesting topic to talk about. So there's this occupation in Parliament that happened recently. So Richard, if you could put up the article, we'll give you a bit of a rundown on that, just to refresh people's memory, because things happen so fast in this country these days that everyone may not remember the details on this. Okay, so this is from CTV News. Jewish Palestinian protesters occupy Ottawa Parliament building. So there's a picture of them outside the Parliament building. It says a group of Jewish Canadian activists professing Israel's ongoing armed offensive in Gaza protesting Israel's ongoing armed offensive in Gaza occupied a parliamentary building in Ottawa on Tuesday morning. I mean, I think that's all we need to know right here. They occupied a parliamentary building. And again, compare and contrast with the Freedom Convoy. No one went inside a single parliamentary building during that. No one occupied anything. But, they did this. Did any of them get arrested? I think you know the answer. They didn't. Now, let's look at a video at some of their behavior outside the parliament buildings. And the police response to that, which you can again compare and contrast to how the police responded to bouncy castles and dance parties at the Freedom Convoy. So we could screen share that, Richard. So I'm not sure why the audio isn't coming through, but you can see these are RCMP vehicles that are, I don't know who they're transporting. Some people suggested maybe it was the Prime Minister himself, but they're blocking it. You know, the RCMP, they're kind of getting out and talking to these individuals, as you can see here. Do we see anyone getting taken to the ground? Do we see anyone getting trampled by horses? Do we see any tear gas being deployed? Yeah, I actually recognize that intersection. I think that building just over that guy's left shoulder, he's flipped around. That's where Maxime Bernier was right there behind the Palestinian flag. Maxime Bernier was doing his pancakes at the Freedom Convoy there. So you can stop sharing now, Richard. Thanks. So we can see how you get treated if you're waving a Palestinian flag, or really, I think any non-Canadian flag would do. I don't think it's just a Palestinian thing. There, it's you know, they don't get arrested. They're not getting trampled. They're not getting tear gassed. But then, you know, we know what happened at the Freedom Convoy. So this is another example of the selective enforcement of the law that I've been talking about for years on this channel. Seems like I've been talking about it a lot more lately. I mean, what more can I say about it? This is obviously not justice or the rule of law. I mean, rule of law is where the law is the same for everyone and everyone is treated the same under that law. I talked about this in last week's episode, so you can look at that for a bit more information, and I linked to some videos. But this is just yet another example, and it's just so bizarre to me that in this country, it's people waving other countries' flags that get the special treatment, not the people waving Canada's own flag. So it's you know, it's a troubling thing. But you know, on the topic of the selective enforcement and the two tiers, we had a question when I was commenting on Ezra Levant getting himself arrested. Chris Freestone here is saying that Ezra is a master grifter. But let's, Richard, if you could put up the comment that I got on the previous episode, taking me to task for my commentary on that. Okay, so first of all, my name's Nicholas. It's not Nick. So he says, good piece overall. However, while I agree Ezra is usually out for publicity, in this case, what he did was exactly what is needed to highlight the two-tier policing. Glossing it over by calling it a publicity stunt is doing a disservice to the Jewish people and cause. Diminishing the fact that his arrest and being told to stay in his area exemplifies the attitude toward Jews. Okay, I don't even know what that means, what this attitude toward Jews is supposed to be. Who has this attitude? Our government sure doesn't. I mean, you know, he talks also about how Jews need and deserve our support, and would expect me to be more supportive of this. I mean, let me put it this way: Jewish people are the only people in this country who have their own particular special protections. They're the only one. I mean, their episode, Richard, episode 1, what is it? 130. I know it's around the one. Yeah, 136. There we go. You know, how the CPC private members bill made it illegal to debate the Holocaust. Now, unless and until they are able to, unless and until they pass the law making it illegal to talk about the residential schools, which we also talked about in a recent episode, until that passes, Jewish people are the only ones that have this very particular and specific protection that no one else has, that you're not even allowed to question an event of their history. Whereas you're allowed to burn down churches. You can question whatever you want about anyone else and their history. As far as our government's concerned, I mean, if you question some religions, you might be getting death threats or have your house bombed, but that's not the government that's going to do that. And there's very heavy penalties that are handed down by our government. There, you know, another recent episode, just checking my notes here, Richard, if you can maybe just put that up there, episode 199, and we talked about what sort of punishments are being handed down to people. I mean, the Sohei Shapu case, I mean, this is a person who is just saying mean things about Jewish people. Like, he didn't kill anyone, he didn't hurt anyone, he didn't physically attack anyone, he didn't vandalize anything. He was just saying things that were not flattering to Jewish people, and he went to jail. He's been sentenced to years in jail. So I just don't disagree. I just can't agree that the facts on the ground support this suggestion that Jewish people are being persecuted by the Canadian government in some way and being told to stay in their place by the Canadian government. That's just simply not the case. Our government is hugely supportive of Israel and the Jewish people. And, I'm not even going to talk about who I support, who I don't support, because I don't talk about things that I'm compelled by law to have a certain position. So you're not going to know what my position is on that. But let's watch a little bit of Ezra getting arrested. And this has nothing to do with him being Jewish. He tried to play it that way. And he said, oh, is it because I'm Jewish? But let's just watch a bit. It's clearly not that. It's because he's being a troublemaker. It's not because he's Jewish or telling him to stay in his place. They're just trying to keep the protesters apart. And he's in there stirring the pot, trying to incite some sort of reaction from the Palestinian protesters. So, Richard, you can start playing it there. Well, I was hoping we'd have audio on that. All right. Well, without audio, we're not going to be able to do that justice. But I mean, this clip here, when the officer's talking to Mr. Levant, I watched it before today's episode just to refresh my memory on it. And the officer's saying, no, like, you're allowed to be here. You're allowed to protest. We just don't want you in here mixing it up with the pro-Palestinian protesters and inciting them. He was essentially breaching the peace. And I mean, the law on breaching the peace is pretty clear that you can't do things that are going to incite a crowd to get in, start some dispute, have a breach of the peace. So note also that the video is almost 8 minutes long. So he was in there heckling and debating with the police and arguing with them and refusing to leave for 8 minutes before they finally said, you know what, like, we have no choice. They're not, you're not listening to us. So we're just going to have to arrest you. So that's why I say he essentially forced them to arrest him, because he just wasn't leaving. They had no other option to get him to stop doing what he was doing. So I think my comments were I still hold that my comments were on point with what he was doing there. It was a publicity stunt. He's trying to play it off as this is some sort of anti-Semitism, and it's because he's Jewish that he got arrested. But from what the video, and we'll put a link in the show description, the evidence, what actually happened on the ground, just doesn't support that. It's not because he's Jewish. It's because he is persisting in causing problems and trying to insert himself into the Palestinian part of the crowd to cause problems. So, and he wouldn't listen to the police, and the police are allowed to remove people. A question here, Prairie is saying, not a fan of us or myself, but how is mere presence inciting? Well, he wasn't just merely present. If he was merely present nearby filming, that would be merely present, but he wasn't doing that. He was right in the midst of them and like heckling them and trying to cause problems and just causing grief to the police. So when you're like actually pushing your way in amidst the protesters, you're causing problems. He's not merely present. That's not an accurate thing to say, that that's all he was doing, was being merely present. But I want to move on and talk about this very interesting survey that's been sent to members of the Canadian Armed Forces. So, Richard, if you could start sharing some of those photos or those screenshots of some of the questions. Be able to zoom in a bit. Here we go. So we got here, in the past 2 to 5 years, have you done any of the following? Liked an extremist group post on social media, donated to an extremist group cause, purchased an extremist group merchandise, like, for example, Make Canada Great Again hat. So, I mean, there is a tip off right there. We already know, looking at this, what they're talking about. I guarantee you that Free Palestine stuff, that's not extremist group. Jews for Palestine, that's not an extremist group. That Greater Israel thing, there where you'll see some of their troops have had those morale patches on their body armor, saying that is essentially saying Greater Israel should be like the entire Middle East area, eventually get rid of all the Muslim people around there. That's not extremist. Antifa is not extremist. No, it's Make Canada Great Again is extremist. Anything pro Canada. Have you formally been a member of an extremist group? I laugh because I can't believe they think that anyone would actually answer any of these. Liked an extremist group on social media, donated to an extremist cause. Oh, that's the same one. Are you able to go to the next one without? I guess we get to see your background there. Is it a good thing to allow marriages between 2 men and 2 women? Women should take their role as wives and mothers more seriously, yes or no? We need to protect our own culture from the influence of other cultures. I mean, the majority of Muslims find terrorism justifiable. When jobs are scarce, men should have more rights to a job than women. There's nothing like, I mean, like, look at, these are such loaded questions. It's so clear what they're getting at here. I mean, if you answer, I mean, other than the one, there's nothing wrong about homosexuality, that's the one where you could answer yes, and you probably wouldn't be getting court-martialed. But, I mean, minority groups provide too many supports. There's a natural hierarchy among races. Blacks and whites should not get married. Jews have too much influence in Canada. The federal government restricted personal freedoms too much during the COVID pandemic. So, Richard, I think we've seen enough, Richard. You can stop that. I mean, you can see what these questions are geared towards. I mean, I think it's very interesting, worth looking at, because, one, it's a perfect example of don't talk. Like, you should, like, if you get a questionnaire like that, you should go running in the opposite direction. Do not answer any of those questions. Because, I mean, those are just like trap questions. You answer the wrong way, you're in trouble. But looking at the collection of questions, you can see a very common theme. And I think it's interesting because it's the Canadian Armed Forces subtly telling its members what are acceptable views for them to hold and what are not acceptable views. And by extension, subtly telling Canada at large what are acceptable views and what are not acceptable views. And I mean, it's exceptional because the Canadian Armed Forces, historically, most militaries, are supposed to be apolitical, but those questions are so political, and you're only allowed to have, it's clear, you're only allowed to have the particular views that Canada is a post-national state with no culture, and you're not allowed to believe in any sort of hierarchy, be it between races, be it between genders. You're not allowed to favor traditional family values. You're not allowed to have concerns over, so, like, you're just, forget freedom of religion and thoughts. I don't even know how to pronounce that, but I've just put it on the view. Nothing subtle about it. Fair enough. It isn't very subtle. It's actually pretty heavy-handed. I mean, it's only subtle insofar as they're not straight up saying you are not allowed to believe this. but by inference, by implication, it's clear. I mean, this is to me, this is like Soviet level stuff. And I mean, read 1984. This is the whole like 1984 wrong think kind of stuff. Although, and I mean, they're telling us what's wrong think and what's right think. So, and apparently, the Canadian Armed Forces is becoming a place that would be, you've got to have right think to be a member of the armed forces, which is very much like the Chinese Patriotic Army. I think that's what they're what they're called. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. The Chinese Army. I have a friend from church who's Chinese, and he said, the army is a very prestigious and very well-paying job in China. So only the most loyal to communism people are allowed to serve in the Chinese, I guess the People's Liberation Army. That's it, the PLA. Only, and you have to have a whole family history of loyalty and ideological purity to the Chinese Communist Party in order to be a member of the People's Liberation Army. So, I mean, this is exactly that kind of stuff that's being implemented here. Now, Richard did put up Kenny Gilman's question about the Daniel Perry case. You'll have to give me a bit more detail. I'd probably know about it, and just the name Daniel Perry isn't ringing a bell to me. So I'm not remembering what that one it was all about. But while you're looking that up, if you can throw me a link, that'd be great. Let's talk about the latest gun grab that's going on here in Canada. So just today, there was another announcement, another press conference. And of course, because tomorrow is this 30-some anniversary, 35th anniversary, something like that. 30 or so anniversary of the École Polytechnique mass shooting. Now, of course, there's so few mass shootings in Canada that they have to go back 35 years and continually talk about that one to justify constant confiscation of firearms. So Richard, you can start queuing that up, because for some reason we're having like about a 10-15 second lag when I ask you to put things up before StreamYard actually puts it up there. But let's just play a bit of that clip from I forget which minister it was, but I mean, the just a question here: are the 324-ish assault style firearms actually listed anywhere yet? No, they're not. I was just looking on the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. I mean, they're on top of that. They're all over that, as one would expect. And they said they have not been listed yet. Apparently, the SKS, much beloved by many people, is not on that list. But other than that, we don't really know. But let's watch this bit of a clip from Bill Blair. Well, of course, we're not going to have audio on that. Richard, could you put the link in the private chat for me? Because I don't have it on this computer, and I'll try to play it on my YouTube. So we'll try to get that. Yeah, you can stop screen sharing. We'll try to get that in a second here. So unfortunately, technical difficulties is the name of the game when it comes to StreamYard, it seems. Let's see if I can. Of course, we've got ads. Let's see if I can get some audio going here. And well, I just want to play this particular clip. I mean, I'm not. It's a whole long press conference where they're going on and on about the École Polytechnique. Like, I mean, it was a terrible thing. Whenever people get, things like that happen, it's always I'm not downplaying the shooting of people as anything that's to be made light of, but I mean, it happened 35 years ago. Like, the people who own firearms now have absolutely nothing to do with that. So I'm going to about the 12-minute and 10-second mark, or about the 12-minute mark of this. So if people, well, we'll maybe put the link in the the comments section here so people know what I'm okay, let's see if I can share the audio. So Richard, you're gonna have to message me in the private chat to let me know whether the audio is working.
Russia's brutal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, Canada has and continues to make every effort to support our Ukrainian allies in their fight to defend their territory, their sovereignty, their citizens, and to win this war. And since 2015, Canada has committed over $19 billion worth of aid and support to Ukraine, including $4.5 billion worth of lethal and non-lethal military equipment. The Ukraine security forces have been very clear about the resources, support, and equipment that they need most. And we have always listened to them and tailored our donations to best meet those needs. And just this past October, we reached out to the Ukrainians once again to see whether any of the weapons that are currently under amnesty through Canada's assault-style firearms compensation program could be of any use to them in their fight against Russia.
So I just stop it there. I mean, that's the key part there. So there, I mean, one can only laugh at the preposterousness of this. With all due respect to the Minister of National Defense, they're going to take away these firearms from Canadians because they're so evil and so dangerous, and because Canadians aren't allowed to defend themselves, because defending yourself is apparently a heinous crime. I mean, and that's parenthetically, that's a big downfall of the firearms rights movement in Canada. In my view, is that we completely surrendered that ground of the right to self-defense, and just said, yeah, we agree, people don't have the right to self-defense. They should just be allowed firearms for hunting and for sport shooting. And now sport shooting's gone, so they've now retreated to hunting, and that'll be gone soon too. But so that said, so according to our government, Canadians should not be allowed to defend themselves. These firearms are intrinsically evil that can only be used for ill and murdering people. But then we're going to give them to Ukraine, which, I mean, Ukraine, we've been told, is like this paragon of democratic virtue. This, you know, they're allowed to defend themselves, but Canada can't. Like, we're going to give them these evil weapons to, like, it's just trying to wrap your mind around the logic is just mind bending, and the hypocrisy and the inconsistency, and again, different standards. So yeah, Ukraine's allowed to defend themselves. I'm just going to highlight the critical thinkers comment here, because it's. I mean, this is what I'm saying here, right? Citizens, we're not allowed to protect. Canadian citizens not allowed to protect ourselves, our families, and our properties, but Ukraine can. And I mean, Ukrainians should be allowed to. I have no problem. I mean, I think there's concerns over corruption of the Ukrainian government, but I mean, Ukrainians themselves have every right to defend themselves. Everyone has the right to defend themselves. It should have. As Prairie says, the basic human nature, it's a basic human right to be allowed to defend yourself. But according to our government, only Ukraine can. So I mean, it's bad enough that they're banning more firearms. It's bad enough that they're once again doing it in a backdoor way, ordering council. I mean, again, it's the same hypocrisy you see in the US. The parties that talk the most about being the big defenders of democracy are the ones who don't care about democracy. And like, democracy would be actually passing these laws through Parliament, not passing it through imperial fiat by way of ordering council, which is the Canadian version of an executive order, which most people are familiar with. You do orders in council when you know that you don't have the democratic support to do it. So that's big, it's a concern. And the problem we have in Canada is we don't have firearms rights. Or is it the Second Amendment in the United States? We don't have that Second Amendment. We don't have a right to carry firearms. Our charter doesn't say anything about firearms, doesn't say anything about self-defense. Arguably, Section 7, the right to security of the life, liberty, and security of the person, would arguably, by inference, mean you have the right to defend yourself. Maybe I guess that's why we have Section 34 of the Criminal Code, which I won't get into that. I did a 2-part series way back in the early part of Don't Talk TV. Maybe Richard can dig it up and put it in the comment section. But I mean, I gave a very detailed rundown of that. Our self-defense laws on paper are actually pretty good. As I've said, the problem is that the police will always prosecute you, or they'll always arrest you. Crown Prince will prosecute you, and you'll most likely be ultimately acquitted, but you're going to have to spend tons of money on a good lawyer, because a good lawyer is going to cost money. You get what you pay for in law as in anywhere else. And you're going to need a good lawyer for self-defense, but you probably would ultimately be acquitted. Now, I think it's worth saying that I don't think that police are going to be kicking in any doors to seize people's firearms. They're most likely going to do what they have done. I mean, even though they talk about a buyback and taking these firearms and giving them to Ukraine, I believe that that's more likely just virtue signaling. They're probably going to grandfather it in because that's generally what they do. And it's an effective tactic because it really neutralizes a lot of the pushback. Police don't need to worry. I mean, they don't need to use resources to retrieve firearms. They don't need to worry about people fighting back. But number one, a lot of people, I mean, unfortunately, my personal view is that Canadians as a whole, present company accepted, but Canadians as a whole seem to have mastered the mentality of, well, it doesn't affect me, so I don't care. And so when it's grandfathered in, the people who currently own firearms, doesn't affect me, so I don't care. You know, I'm fine, screw you. And they're playing the long game. What they want to have a completely disarmed populace and defenseless populace is, by the long game, they want your children to never be allowed to own firearms, your grandchildren to never own firearms, and your great-grandchildren to never own firearms. So grandfathering it in does it perfectly. And so, like, I mean, none of my children are 18. They can't own firearms yet. They won't be able to buy anything to get in under the wire before this law gets passed. Most people are probably the same. And it'll only take 20, 30 years before essentially no one owns anything because they've done that. So playing the long game, you know, it's practical on their end and it works very well. And they know they can count on the Conservative Party of Canada to do nothing to stop this. So, you know, that's worth talking about. I mean, Canadians aren't going to fight back. Canadians aren't going to vote for who they should vote for, or in my view, they're going to. I mean, I'm 45 years old. I've seen the pattern. You get liberals for 3, 4, 5 terms. They finally destroy the economy and push enough new stuff that people get upset. So they elect the Conservatives for between 4 and 8 years. The Conservatives, they maybe undo the odd thing, like, oh, Harper, he took away the firearms registry. Okay, he did one thing good on firearms, but who cares? He didn't put anything in place to prevent any of this stuff. All that did was a bit of breathing room, calm people down. 4 to 8 years of liberals traveling the speed limit. All the things implemented, pretty much everything implemented by Chrétien Martin was, you know, entrenched, solidified, and then the economy got a bit better. Can count on the Conservatives for that. And people will then forget about that after they're doing well again. Then it's like, okay, well, because I'm Canadian, I have to feel guilty about doing well. We need to, you know, bring in an infinity number of people who are less well off than me. We've got to give our money away to stuff, and yeah, let's elect this, you know, this guy because he's hip, he's cool, he's got nice hair, and then we're stuck with them. So that's what's gonna happen. The same. Yeah, Prairie is spot on. PP's the same as in Pierre Poilievre. So I mean, let me go back to this comment that came in before we even started. Question about Maxime Bernier. Can you give one example of a vote cast for the Purple Party that has to this date resulted in any benefit to Canada? Well, I'm going to flip that around. Show me an example of a vote cast for the Blue Party that to this date has resulted in any benefit to Canada. You know, practical voting. I personally, I mean, you vote how the way you want. Unlike Conservative Party of Canada supporters, I'm not going to go around angrily telling people how you need to vote. I'm going to say how I'm going to vote. I'm going to say that I think it's a mistake to vote for other parties, and I'll give you reasons, but my reasons are not practicality. or if they are practicality, they're more long view practicality. The Conservative Party is a temporary Band-Aid, a temporary soma, a little bit of Advil to make you forget that you have a brain tumor for a few hours, and then it's going to come raging back when they do nothing to fix anything in the long term. So that's why, you know, I'm old enough that I've seen this movie enough times that I know exactly what's going to happen when the Conservatives get elected in 2025. And, you know, I'm going to vote my conscience in what I want to vote. That's all I have control over. I know that everyone else in Canada is going to vote Conservative. I can't stop that. All I can do is vote the way I'm going to vote. And, you know, we know what's going to happen. And you heard it here first. We'll see. We'll come back in 5 years after the Conservatives have been elected. I mean, they'll do some things. They'll do some things. I mean, don't get me totally wrong. I mean, the economy will probably get better. I think they can probably be counted on to do some stuff about the carbon tax before the economy gets completely nuked by that, with the carbon tax going way up this spring. They'll nibble around the edges a little bit. Again, just enough to kind of calm people down and get people not upset, because really it's when people are upset is the only time when there's a potential for change. So they're just going to make sure that nothing changes. So, you know, that's my view on the practicality of the situation. You know, and I'm not looking. I'm going to vote for what I know will work long term. I'm not going to vote for a Band-Aid solution just because that's what everyone else is voting. So that's probably enough said about that. As fun as it was to rant about Canadian politics and about the Uniparty, I don't want to be here all night. As much as I enjoy talking to all of you, you know, I do have a family who wants to see me, as I've mentioned from time to time. So let's talk about let's talk about another. You know, we're talking about wrongthink. We're talking about unequal application of law and wrongthink. Those seems to be the themes of Canada certainly in the last couple of years. It seems like it really ramped up since COVID started. It would be interesting to do a deep dive into all the connections between COVID and all the societal changes that got ushered in, because, you know, on the outside it's about a pandemic, but then all, you know, the things really ramped up in terms of the changes to society, and really the whole, like, the wrong thing. Sorry, man. Of course, always got to do the autoplay on me. So we'll get there. We're still a bit new with doing this stuff. I've got to figure out how to get Richard to actually be able to screen share properly, but at least I can. So we're adapting and overcoming, but we'll continue to learn. I think this is only our third episode with StreamYard anyway. So so let's talk about a town that didn't say anything against LGBT people. They just decided not to do a Pride Day. Let's have a look at that.
Big fine to pay. The township of Emo, located near the Minnesota border, will have to pay thousands of dollars to a local 2S LGBTQ+ organization after the town refused to recognize Pride Month. Standing by live in studio with more on this is CTV's Alexandra Hollick. Alexandra, how much money are we talking about?
A total of $15,000, Marilee. And that's not all. The mayor and the CAO were also ordered to take human rights training. The township of Emo and its mayor were handed a hefty fine by the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal last month for refusing to recognize Pride Month and discriminating against a local 2S LGBTQ+ organization.
The explicit reason that they did not adopt our proclamation was obviously tied to the sexual orientation and gender identity issues attached to Pride.
Emo is located nearly 200 kilometers south of Kenora and has a population of just over 1,300 people.
Generally, this is a non-controversial thing, but it's an important signal in a small community.
The dispute dates back to 2020. Borderland Pride requested that the town declare June as Pride Month and display a rainbow flag for a week. The resolution was brought forward at a May 12th council meeting by then Councillor Lincoln Dunn.
I had warned members of council that I was aware of the potential ramifications of not passing this bylaw.
But the bylaw didn't pass. The vote was 3-2 against, with Emo Mayor Harold McQuaker in opposition.
There's no flag being.
So I think that's enough to give you a flavor. So, you know, it's incredible. And this shows the great danger of these human rights laws, because now they're getting to the point. It's not only it's not only that you can't discriminate against people, it's now considered discrimination if just you fail to fall down and bow towards enough and give them a special day. Like, it's just, how many groups don't get special days? Wouldn't it actually be non-discriminatory for there to be not a Pride Day? Because there's no Catholics Day, there's no White Men Day, there's no Men Day. Actually, I don't even think there's a Women's Day. There aren't, Muslim Day, there isn't Hindu Day, there isn't Indian Day. There's, so why is Pride, Pride is given a very prominent pride of place, pun intended, and to fail to do that is now by the Human Rights Tribunal considered discrimination. I mean, that is just absolutely not what discrimination is. Discrimination is where you're not treating everyone else, you're not treating someone the same as everyone else. What's happening now is they've morphed that into, if you don't give special treatment to certain approved groups, that's discrimination. I mean, it's not discrimination. What this is, once again, is it's compelled speech. Goodbye Cruel World is absolutely spot on. You stole the words out of my mouth. This is compelled speech. And if you don't do the speech, you don't offer the incense to the emperor, to use a Christian analogy. Christians were ordered, you have to offer some incense to the emperor. No, but not a big deal. It does offer a bit of incense, and Christians couldn't do that. It violates their conscience. I mean, they went and got murdered by being fed to lions in the Colosseum. We're entering the same sort of stuff now with the compelled speech. You have to believe, not only do you have to believe it, you have to publicly proclaim this. That is the very definition of compelled speech. And we've seen this. Viewers may not know this, but I can't even remember when it was. 2018, I think. It was before COVID that the Law Society of Ontario tried enforcing a compelled speech on lawyers, saying that we had to all make a public proclamation that we were in favor of diversity, inclusivity, and equality. Now, fortunately, many lawyers at that time declined. I don't know if those will be, if that would happen if they tried it again, but it didn't go through that time. But I'm just saying, Stephanie Slaughter asked, is Indigenous land acknowledgements also compelled speech? Well, it's compelled speech if you're required to do it. I mean, if it's optional, then it's not compelled speech. But if something is going to happen to you, if you're going to get ordered, like this clip we just watched, you're going to get ordered to pay thousands of dollars, then it's compelled speech. So it's all if there's consequences, if there's negative consequences. People on the left like to say, oh, you have the freedom to do this, you just need to be prepared to accept the consequences. Well, as I've said, then it's not a right. If there's negative consequences for doing something, you don't have the right to do it, because if you're punished for doing something, that means you don't have the right to do it. So to actually have the freedom for something, there would be no negative consequences because you're free to do it. Free, meaning you won't have any negative consequences. So this is incredibly concerning. And it also goes back to a lot of people were hoping that the human rights tribunals would maybe come to bat and help them during COVID, when they were being forced to take vaccines. I think you can see from this, these people will never, they're not the people who are going to help you with that. They're going to do stuff like this. They're not going to help you with medical freedom. So it's 8:45, went a bit longer than I was hoping to go, but we did have a lot to cover. We had a lot of interesting things to talk about. But I think that's about all the time we've got for today. For not too many questions, I'll go back to the very beginning very, very quickly. This question: what are your rights when approached by a police officer in public? walk in the store, as I've said many times, if you're not doing a licensed activity, you have the absolute right to silence. Just keep on walking and ignore them. You do have to show them ID if you're doing a licensed activity. So, for example, what are my rights in this scenario? You're off on a fishing trip. So if you're on a fishing trip, then you have to show them your fishing license to prove that you have the right to fish. Or if you're out hunting, you have to show them your hunting license. If you're driving a car, you have to show them your driver's license. But for anything that does not require a license, such as walking down the street, shopping in the store, your rights are absolute silence. You don't have to acknowledge them. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to answer anything. You can just keep going. And if you're in doubt or they're giving you hassle, you can pull out your cell phone. Everyone has cell phones, and call a lawyer. But I stress that you have to show your ID if you're doing a licensed activity. But actually, for the whole walking down the street thing, I actually know a lawyer in Kitchener who was accosted like that by police. They thought he was someone else because the way he dresses when he's not doing lawyer things, I guess, looked like the type of people the police look for. So they were hounding him. He knew his rights. He was a lawyer. He just ignored them, refused to give them his ID. They eventually grabbed him, threw him up against the wall, put him in cuffs, pulled out his wallet, looked at his ID, saw, oh, he's not who we were looking for. So he sued them, and they settled out of court for $4,000 for that wrongful arrest and the temporary detention. I mean, they let him go as soon as they saw they saw his ID and he wasn't who they thought he was. But the fact that they settled out of court, I mean, that I think demonstrates that they knew they were in the wrong. He probably could have gotten more at trial if they were offering $4,000, but $4,000 from his perspective wasn't bad. So I figured I'll just take that and not spend any more time on this. So yeah, this is a good one. Oops. There, you definitely don't have ID. It's, not a bad idea to just conveniently forget to have ID on you. So I know Goodbye Cruel World is concerned that only $4,000. I mean, that was the offer they made for an out-of-court settlement, and he took it. As I say, I think he probably could have gotten more, probably significantly more, if he went to trial. But for him, he has the right as well of personal autonomy. That to him that was enough. That different people might have a different price. I mean, that's what he. That was enough for him. So he had that right to settle for that. So that's all the time we have tonight. Of course, this video itself does not constitute legal advice. So if you need legal advice, call a lawyer. As I suggested, if the police are following you around, for an example like that, call a lawyer. My number is on the little ticker on the bottom there. So you can call me, call another lawyer. I'm, during the day, I'm in court almost all the time. So admittedly, I may be hard to get a hold of. So feel free to call someone else. But there's my number and my website. But before I forget, I mentioned there was a very important announcement. So for those of you who stuck around, you get to hear about this. Next week, we're doing another live. And Richard, give me the screen share. You'll see who we're doing the live stream with. I have a very interesting guest for next week. So I get a drum roll here. Richard, are you awake? Okay, I guess he doesn't have anything to share. I thought he had it all good to go. Theo Fleury, well-known Canadian hockey player, but also well-known for being an advocate of freedom and people's rights and an advocate of people's recovery from addiction issues. Theo Fleury is going to be joining us next week on Don't Talk TV. So same place, same time. If you're interested on seeing me have a chat with Mr. Fleury, please join us 8 p.m. next week on Thursday. And if you liked, and please share that around, spread the word on that if you think other people would be interested in that. And of course, if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and following us on social media. And of course, I forgot, suggestions we're open to. But yeah, share, and subscribe, get the word out so we can get lots of people to see that live and our other content.